Welcome, welcome, ladies and gentlemen. So happy to see so many of you here already. Thank you for being on time. Gold star to all of you. I hope your 2024 has already been fantastic and that it obviously continues to be so. My name is Paul Sims. I'm coming to you from London at Impatient Health, and I'm obviously really grateful that you could be here today. And it's wonderful to see that so many of you I can see are already in that fantastic little chat window. And you are introducing yourself, which is exactly what I want. I think some of you have been at one or two of my webinars in the past from the looks of things. So yeah, do introduce yourself. Do tell us what's interesting to you and what motivates you about this webinar or what you'd like to learn, perhaps. Be really interesting to see what you have to say. Okay, you've got an hour with me. It's going to be fun. It's going to be a little bit frightening at times, so hold on. But I really want this to be as interactive as possible. Now that you've found your way to the chat window, I want you to use it and use it regularly. So please do make this a dialogue. You're going to see in a moment that we're going to have some good Q&A towards the end of this session. Okay. So the other thing, of course, is that you need to set your little blue drop-down box to everyone. So many of you love to write to just me, which is beautiful, I love it. But if you can write to everyone, that will be a lot more useful. Okay, let's get a move on. This is all about a thought experiment. What would it be like if Elon Musk, whether you love him or hate him, what it would be like if he ran a pharmaceutical company? And the reason, I guess the biggest motivation for this was the feeling that even when I come across people who describe themselves as innovators, who have innovation in their job title, I find that we in our industry are so focused on the things that we have to do, the things that we've done before, the things that we're required to do. It's really hard for us to see alternatives. And Elon Musk is just a convenient person that when everyone knows who he is, a convenient person that can provide an alternative outlook. And that's what I really want today. We're going to see a bit more about that in the past. So, I guess, the question immediately on everyone's lips is this guy going to be a complete reckless liability? Is he going to destroy everything? Or is he going to be, nirvana? Is he going to be the panacea, the answer to all of our problems? And it almost seems like you get a different character, a different Elon Musk, depending on the day of the week sometimes. Is he going to effectively leave his employees for dead and absolutely destroy the company and all those around him? Or is he going to be collaborative? And is he going to work out what indeed this healthcare system needs and how to be pragmatic as well as gracious in the process? Again, it seems like we have two sides of this same person often showing up. Is he going to be, the archetypical evil scientist and discover things that might excite him but might be ultimately dangerous one day with his reckless and perhaps ratherly uncautious decision-making that he is sometimes famed for? Or is he going to be benevolent, and is he going to be diligent as he goes by, and is he going to be really human focused and, like the family man that sometimes we know he can be as well? Is he going to look after us as we go forward? Well, all of these things are for us to decide. But the interesting thing is that I asked you this question when you registered for this webinar. Some of you may not remember because I started telling people back in December about this session, but I did ask you. And by the way, we had nearly 2,000 of you register for this session, which is obviously fantastic. So we can get some good data from this stuff. So the question I asked was, if you heard Elon Musk was assuming control of a major pharma company, which of the following would be closest to your reaction? And I don't know if it's pharma and the fact that we like that middle road, but 2/3 of you chose interesting. Interesting. A significant minority, 13% of you said relief. At last, someone will shake things up. 2% of you were indifferent, but then the collective fear obviously outweighs the relief. So roughly 20%, nearly 20% of you chose fear of some kind, fear for company employees and fear for a negative impact on patients. And actually, when I was discussing this with a couple of people just before this webinar, people were interested, what exactly are you feared about? What is that negative impact that you think he's going to have on patients? What is that negative impact you think he'll have on company employees? If you don't mind just writing in the chat window what you personally think would be the fear, the manifestation of your fear, then it'd be really interesting for us to take a look at that. So please just jot down what you think and share with us all. I want to also ask an additional question on top of this right now. So if you look at your screen, you will see a poll question turn up. Excuse me while I just get my stuff sorted out on my screen. Here we go. Your motivation. So which of these three factors, which of these factors made you want to sign up to this webinar? So I've given you 7 options there, and you can choose which one you find to be motivating and which one you find not to be motivating. But please do take a look through all of those. I'm going to leave this open for a couple of minutes, so you've got time to answer it, and then I will close it and we'll share the results in just a moment. In the meantime, let's move on. Why? Why? I suppose, I mean, I've already given you some of the rationale behind today's session and what motivated me, so I won't go too heavily into that. But I do want to make the point that you don't have to be an Elon Musk type figure. Here's 2003's FT Person of the Year, Lars Jørgensen of Novo Nordisk, and of course, many of you know the leader of the company that made the initial foray into the GLP-1 formulations, and as a result, considered by many outside our industry as one of the great technology innovations of our age. So, and he's famously, of course, understated. As you can see, the first lines of the FT's article are about his understated approach. You do not have to be Elon Musk to make progress in this industry. But of course, Lars is relying very much on the science, on the product, and Elon Musk may try to disrupt in other ways. Let's have a look at what some of those are. At Impatient Health, this is the organization that I founded just over 3 years ago. We believe that we are still young as an industry. We believe that this is not the mature and traditional place that everybody describes it as. We are youthful. We have all of our potential ahead of us. And in fact, if you look on an evolutionary scale, and here's the typical phylogenetic tree that any biologist in the room will be familiar with, I would argue that if you were to use the metaphor of evolution in business, that Pharma is very much still on the left-hand side of this graph. We are still pretty early on, and we aren't really speciated that heavily as yet. You could almost take the logo of some of our offices and replace it with the logo of another office, and you wouldn't even know which company you were in a lot of the time. Well, that has started to change, particularly in the last few years, but we still have a long way to go. There is so much unfulfilled potential, and we are far away from being adapted to the different habitats and specific species that our patients need us to be, according to which type of patient we are trying to serve. There is a long, long way to go, and I'm very excited about the future. It's what motivates me to be in this industry. And it's why, of course, with that many potential futures, we'll never get to any of those potential futures unless you can envisage what those different futures actually are. And that's why we're doing this session. We need to be able to envisage those alternatives. Elon Musk provides one of them. I often argue that pharma is an industry of incredibly bright individuals, but all with a very narrow focus because we have to, okay? So, right, I've got about 2/3 of you. Come on, guys. A third of you are asleep already. 2/3 of you have voted in my poll. I'm going to hold this open another 10 seconds to get your answers in, please, and then I will share the results. Okay, I'm Paul Sims. I'm also going to introduce later on in this session Rena Newton, who is a fantastic person all around, as you will see for yourself. She's actually a compliance expert, and she's going to be quizzing me at the end of this session, as well as answering some of the questions that you ask. So please do get those questions out there. She will ask them to me as well. I also want to say a quick thank you to a few people who gave me some fantastic feedback as I prepared for this. So thank you, Jill, Colin, and Kevin. You were super valuable. Okay. One more thing. I'm going to be making this. I've written a report. I've written a white paper, 50-page long white paper, and I will send it to you after this. There is not enough time in this session to get through everything today, so I will be sending you a report after this. You don't need to ask me for it. I will send it to you probably later today. Okay. Right. Number 1. The grand challenge. This is the starting point. This is the starting point for Elon Musk as well in possibly any of his ventures. Actually, before we do that, I'm going to quickly share the poll results. I'm sure you're all very keen to see what those are. There you go. You can see those and look at your screen. And hopefully you can figure out the answers on this. Interestingly, not that many people considered Elon Musk a car crash, which is perhaps surprising to some, maybe. Thankfully, very few bored as well. Good to hear. Right, the grand challenge. Let's get on with it. We in Pharma, we all have our taglines, we all have our company intentions and our slogans and all the rest of it. And in actual fact, they're all quite similar, I'm afraid to say. They're all as you would expect, and they can be motivating. But if you were an Elon Musk, this would not be considered nearly enough. None of these he would describe as being inspiring and exciting. You will have heard him talk a lot about being excited about the future. And he really wants to, drive to the moon, beyond the moon. And I think that he would start with much bolder claims. Interestingly, he is, of course, often cited as one of the billionaires in the billionaire space race. And it's easy to sort of equate him with the Bransons and Bezoses of the world, but if you look at what they've actually achieved, it's actually very, very different. Virgin Galactic and Blue Origin really have only got up to the Kaplan line, whereas Elon Musk regularly takes his rockets up to around about 550 kilometers above the Earth's surface to launch satellites and become a commercially viable business as well. The levels of ambition are on another level, even when compared to some of the entrepreneurs that we see and the big names that we talk about. And I want you to just get into your mind that this guy is not motivated as commercially as you think he might be. He is motivated by having an almost religious fervor. He sort of almost believes he's on a mission from God to and justifies his missions in that way as far bigger than sort of typical humanity. So for SpaceX, you will know perhaps that his aim is to make life multi-planetary. He sees this as just the simple next step in our evolution. We went from being single-celled creatures to walking, talking animals, and then populating our current planet. And he just sees this as being the next step in the progression of humanity, and that it is absolutely important. And what he typically does is he will come up with these missions. He actually came up with this one in conversation with James Cameron, the film director, directed Avatar and Titanic and Terminator. He came up with comes up with these missions, and then he backfills it with a commercial model in order to get to those things. Okay, this is one of the things that inspires a lot of people who do like him and are fond of him. For X, of course, you might argue it's not going very well, but his ambition is to make that the everything app, and Twitter just didn't fit with that as a brand. With companies like sustainability, with Tesla, it's about a transition to sustainable energy. It is not about cars. Okay, you would be completely wrong if you decided that Tesla was a car company and compared it as such, because cars are just a first step. It's very much about the ecosystem, as we'll talk later. And actually, if you've been paying attention, then you will note that Elon Musk has been spending a lot of time actually developing the next major product from Tesla, which is robots. And the latest iteration released just last month, called Optimus, is available. And you can see that it's a very advanced system. And Elon Musk will, in his very sort of straightforward way, explain that the market for robots is far, far greater than the market for cars. He also anticipates that people would buy potentially more than one of these per household, or more than they would do of cars. And of course, it's a blue ocean market. And I wouldn't be surprised if 2 or 3 years from now we talk about Tesla more in terms of this than we do about their electric vehicles. So you absolutely have to just be aware that these things are on the horizon. So what are the big ideas that he might put into a life sciences situation? Well, here's just a few from me. And I don't really want to go into these into detail. If you want to go into detail, they're obviously all written more extensively about in my white paper. But the point is that this is the necessary starting point for the Musk way of doing things. If there is no big grand goal, then it doesn't work in the first place. So the sorts of things that I think that would probably get him going are things like the augmented human, going beyond the base level, not just curing illness, but going beyond what healthy traditionally looks like and finding ways to do that. Gene therapy, of course, has been a very niche endeavor, but a lot of gene therapy could be available for a mainstream audience if it was designed that way. And I think that because his big focus in so many of his companies has actually been the manufacturing process and the system design around whatever he's doing, that actually a mass market gene therapy solution might be the way forward. Those of you who might know about Elon might know that he actually believes that our birth rate on Earth is too low, not too high, against most people's convention. He himself, I think, has 11 children. And the Immortality Project, of course, in order to be able to not just sustain healthy life, but to sustain reproducibility in that life would be really key as well. And a lot of you, of course, anyone that owns a Tesla car, I don't, will be aware of his medical multiverse, the option for the digital twin, for the additional technology to be able to act as that kind of control panel for your own life. And I think that would be a strong motivator as well. Sorry, just accidentally screwing up the slides here. I think a lot of his stuff, of course, would have focused on technology stuff. So I've already talked about reproduction at one point. That Optimus robot that I showed you earlier would be kind of a part of that, because he would allow much older parenting to become possible, and therefore much greater assistance in being able to work while having children and being at old age while having children, and the necessary help that that would require. Of course, he's a proponent of AI, and we'll talk about that in a moment. He also owns one of the biggest data sets in Twitter, or X. And I think that he could really pioneer autonomous drug development. That's a level beyond AI drug development, and it's also development focused, not discovery focused when I say that as well. I think a lot of progress there. Interested to know, by the way, if you've got any reactions to this, please do say. A company you may obviously be aware of is Neuralink. He also has a pretty ambitious goal there. It started off being about the human-brain connection. He almost has the idea that if we're going to keep humans and robots happy living together in the future, then robots and robotics and technology effectively needs to become an extension of the human. So the point of Neuralink is to break down the barrier between the human and the machine, and to fuse the two where possible. Now, of course, that can be done initially in a very therapeutic way. And of course, that is the current focus. It's about, overcoming paralysis and things like that. But of course, again, he has the grand future plan, and it's all about going beyond the norm and looking about the enhanced human. So, by the way, you can join the clinical trials study if you've got ALS right now for Neuralink, if you so want, go to their website. But there are a number of ideas that would obviously dovetail with Neuralink as well that he might pursue, and I'm not going to go into those. But things like the emotion-enhancing therapeutics, ways of curing mental disease through technological intervention, I think will be very interesting. The point is, he would aim for the stars, aim for the big stuff. The way I codify this, and this is actually something I came up with many years ago, before I possibly even knew about Elon Musk's existence, is something I call the 4 A's. And this is kind of a mantra that I sometimes repeat, because I think Elon Musk, of course, doesn't know the 4 A's, but he actually has ended up following them quite strongly. The first step is coming up with a goal that's more than just ambitious. It's audacious. It's almost offensively ambitious. It requires that inspiring and differentiated goal. Do you have that in your own organization? I would argue that very, 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 very few of us actually do. Something that seems almost impossible to achieve. That is what then attracts the attention. That very fact alone is what drives the interest, drives the holy shit, is that actually feasible emotion? And that attracts the media attention, etc. And it's that attention that then drives the accountability. Now everyone's watching you, you have to perform, okay? And that accountability is then what leads to the action. There's no hiding place anymore. And that is absolutely central to the way in which a business model run by Elon Musk would work. Because this guy doesn't consider himself to actually be a surefire success at all, or at least he certainly didn't in the olden days. Of course, he's gained confidence over the years, but he genuinely thought that he only had a 10% chance of success at Tesla. He didn't found the company, by the way. He came into it after it had already started and took over as CEO, actually in a kind of hostile way. The company, for the vast majority of its life, nearly went bankrupt. He really had to continue raising money, finding ways to shortcut the usual processes in order just to keep this company alive. And it was definitely not a surefire success, despite its ever-rising share price for a long, long time. But it's an interesting equation. It's like the underlying failure of the company propped up by the excitement of the potential. And it's that potential that allows him to keep the company surviving, going on. And that valuation that continuous valuation driven by this sort of story stock narrative that Musk has been pushing forward is absolutely key. At its peak, Tesla was worth $1.02 trillion US dollars in January 2022. Right now, it's worth about 735 billion, which sounds like a big loss, but to be honest with you, it's on par with many market movements over that period. We all know that we've been in a semi-recession. And let's compare this to Pharma, shall we? So these are the market valuations of the biggest pharma companies at the moment, Lilly riding high, but also companies like Novo, very fast growing. But as you can see, Tesla is a significant margin higher than really a lot of what we consider to be our big name pharma companies, despite, of course, having a fraction of the revenues in so many cases. Very, very similar to the car. Tesla's worth more than the rest of the car industry combined, by the way, in case you didn't realize. And it's absolutely critical to understand that this is a superpower. The other company that's done this very well historically is Jeff Bezos at Amazon. He was able to, without turning a profit for nearly 20 years of its existence, he was able to keep that share price very strong by telling people about the future potential of the company, by talking about the future, something that we in pharma never do. And having that ability to talk confidently about what's coming, I think, is absolutely critical and crucial, and is actually a strategy. It drives the ability to invest in things that others cannot. And that is where some of the things come from. So moving on to the next chapter, which is called Harness the Crowd. What I really want you to understand, of course, is that sales and marketing has historically been a huge expenditure for our industry. And this is a bit of an outdated graph. It's a few years old, but it still shows that the proportion of the orange circle, the sales and marketing, towards the blue circle is obviously very significant. And Elon Musk would take one look at this and go, oh my God, what a stupid situation. He is famously completely anti-sales and marketing. He regards it as an inferior practice. And when he took over his cousin's solar company, which was heavily reliant on a sales model, he berated the executives, asking them whether they were a product company or a sales company. And of course, he got rid of most of the staff there. And this is many years before his Twitter stuff that he's, of course, very famous for. He would most definitely, because of that audacious goal and the attention that it provides, he would be able to get rid of a lot of our colleagues in sales and marketing, and he would see that as the absolute opportunity to do so. So I'm sorry to say that many of us listening to this call would not survive Elon Musk being in charge. Of course, we're all familiar now with the Twitter story. I'm not sure if you're aware quite how heavy it's been. He's now actually fired 90% of the workforce. It's down to about 1,000 employees in mid-2023, as you can see from this article here. And when challenged on this, actually, I was watching a talk that he did at a recent event, and I was very interested in this quote he made at the event. His answer was, "It's just a group chat, a large group chat. You don't need tens of thousands of staff to run a group chat." Kind of has a point, I think. But very drastic measures, of course, because you know that 80% of the employees were gone within 2.5 months of him taking over. So very drastic changes. And a lot of people, particularly those in Silicon Valley, actually saw that as an inspiration, something to be drawn from. My God, you can get rid of that many staff and still operate. Many would argue he's killing the company, but it's early days. It's only been a year, just over a year, right? Remember, it took 7 or 8 years for Tesla to get out of the blocks, really, and be a performing company. If you've listened to me give talks before, you will have heard me say stuff like this. If Steve Jobs can get us excited about laptops, if Elon Musk can get people energized over batteries, then we sure as hell should be able to get people interested in healthcare. It's the most emotive industry of all, right? It's the one that, you would argue is the most motivating out of any industry. We most definitely should be able to get people excited about it going forward. And we really have no excuses in doing so. We obviously cite many things. And what Elon would do is he would actually not focus on those medicines or areas with the highest health impact. Is that wrong? Well, I would argue that many of us don't either in pharma. He would not even focus on what had the highest commercial performance either. That wouldn't be his focus. His focus would instead be focus on the most impactful health story, the one that drove the most excitement and interest as the fuel behind it. Another example from his Neuralink platform was that when he became frustrated with the slow progress that the team was making, instead of looking at the progress, the processes that, that's how you or I would probably go in and try and manage a team, he instead focused on the goals when he was doing it. He only wanted goals that would transform humanity and capture the public's imagination. And this is where the company changed from being a therapeutic-focused company to be an augmentation-focused company going forward. So that is absolutely his modus operandi. And of course, he has the ability to gather the data to understand what the appropriate health targets and health focus might be going forward. The other thing is he would take a very different approach from most of us in our industry, where we kind of think, let's not overpromise. No, let's not say we're going to cure cancer. Let's not say that we're going to revolutionize an industry. Let's not project what a clinical trial outcome might be going forward. We don't want to overpromise. We don't want to create false hope. We're scientists at the end of the day. We don't like to make assumptions, and we certainly don't like to say anything unless it's been double or triple checked. That is the way that we go, and we fall on the excuse of being public companies some of the time as well. Well, Elon Musk runs public companies, and his typical thing is, it'll be ready a year from now. He will typically say something like that before consulting with his own employees as to whether or not that is feasible. In fact, he uses the fact that he makes a public statement of that type as an internal motivator to make sure that then his staff and engineers actually do it. This does work sometimes, and at other times it does not work. One of his employees recently said that his biggest fault is that he can demoralize his engineers and scientists by coming up with targets and goals that are too ambitious and unrealistic. But actually, in the majority of cases, believe it or not, he has hit his goals. And in the majority of cases, it has actually worked that he's done things at often an order of magnitude cheaper or faster or better than other companies have been able to. And this type of public statement and conviction is actually what drives so much of it. You may or may not know that when he started SpaceX, he actually went to Russia initially to try and buy rockets. He couldn't figure out how an individual would get into the space industry. Fair question, to be honest with you. So he went to Russia to see if he could buy something. He'd just come off the end of selling his PayPal shares, and he had some money in the bank. He wanted to move into rocketry. This was back in 2001. And he was, effectively rejected and laughed out of the room by Russians who didn't know him when he tried to buy his newspaper, when he tried to buy his rockets. But what he realized on the trip home was that ultimately rockets are metal and fuel. Okay, this is an example of what he calls first principles thinking. He does not worry about the fact that creating space rockets is a difficult challenge. He thinks more about the fact that ultimately it's just a bunch of metal and fuel. And if you boil stuff down to its first principles in every single case, and this is, by the way, Elon Musk created a school once in his home, and he focused the entire school on teaching the first principles of science. So this is absolutely fundamental to how he likes to approach things. And he very much thinks that the only law and the only rule that cannot be broken are the rules of physics and natural sciences. Everything else can be changed. That's his attitude. That's why he can sometimes come across as very argumentative with regulators, etc. Everything else can be changed. So do not see anything as an obstacle apart from the laws of physics. And if you haven't broken things down that far, then you haven't got to the level of solution that you need to. So that is absolutely something that he would do. He calls this the idiot index. So it's something that he's developed over time. Basically, he looks at the raw materials versus the cost of something. And if he equates that there is too much of a difference between the two, he describes it as an idiotic product. Okay, and the space industry was full of idiotic products, stuff that could be made in the car industry for an order of magnitude less expensively. And he knew that through his own manufacturing techniques, he would be able to develop those things at a fraction of the cost. And guess what? He did in so many cases. I would argue that he would look at pharma in much the same way as having a very high idiot index. The cost of actually doing things is far greater than the cost that it actually is, particularly when it comes to the system and the process level of doing things. Those of you who've seen me give a talk before may have seen me talk about customer leadership. It's pretty much the only unique idea I've ever come up with, so forgive me for mentioning it more than once. But customer leadership, I think, is something that Elon Musk would embrace. And it's not something that's known, it's just a phrase I came up with. But it's pretty much along the lines of what you've seen Henry Ford say. If I asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. David Bowie said, never play to the gallery. It's terribly dangerous to fulfill other people's expectations. Steve Jobs, you might have heard of him. Most of the time, people don't know what they want until you show it to them. The point is, the customer doesn't know. And we in our industry are very heavily reliant on market research and customer sentiment to decide what to do. That is wrong, I'm afraid to say. It doesn't mean that you're deaf. You do listen to customers, but the initial innovation has to come from you. Okay, the initial innovation has to come from you. You're the one with the resources, the know-how, the brain power to actually be able to figure out what could work. And you see this, of course, all over industries like the car industry, where they produce these concept cars. No customer would ever come up with these. They are done to project and provoke an image to a customer base and to determine what their reactions would be. You have to do the same. It's exactly what Elon Musk would do. He would project his own health ideas and health innovations, his own concept models. Every car company does this, by the way. It's not just Tesla. You know, here's the British contingent. Thank you, Rolls-Royce. Very, very nice of you. I mean, how the hell do you even drive this stuff? Another industry that does this, fashion. Okay, you've seen these crazy catwalks. No one will buy this stuff. No one will ever wear it, but it's done to provoke. The leading designers, when they get the world's eyes on them, they produce weird stuff like this. Haute couture. It's absolutely what you see coming down the catwalks, because they are trying to gauge what actually provokes and interests and find out new trends that can then enter the mainstream products later on. And that is an essential way of thinking. You can actually see it codified within the Tesla's secret master plan. If you haven't read this message before, then you should. Obviously, I'm not going to give you time to read it right now, but just to look at the highlighted section at the bottom, the strategy of Tesla is to enter at the high end of the market, where customers are prepared to pay a premium, and then drive down a market as fast as possible to higher unit volume and lower prices with each successive model. Some of you might argue Pharma's model is similar to that, in the fact that we obviously release high-priced medicine, advanced therapies on a market before then, obviously they become generics. But no, it's not the same. It's a different business model entirely. If you look at how it's done, it's obviously a gradual move towards the mainstream in terms of the actual product type itself, the invention of new products. And if you look at the evolution of Tesla over time, you can see exactly price decreases and mainstream adoption increases. And believe it or not, the robot model that I talked about earlier, the Optimus robot you can see on the right-hand side, is part of that plan as well, even though the product is quite different. Okay, so please understand that that is an entire business model that would be different. Patient advocacy. I'm sure many people that would describe themselves as patients on this line, but I would also argue that patient advocacy is an area that has not attracted enormous levels of investment from our industry in the past. It is almost an afterthought for many of us. And I would argue that Elon Musk would go in big on patient advocacy. Why? Because he's done it before. He's done it effectively with the Tesla Motors Club, which is, of course, a club of very motivated Tesla owners who are, in many cases, investors in the company as well, and are much more than just customers. They've become much stronger than customers. And what's really interesting is some of the things that the Tesla Motors company has done. Not only are they empowered volunteers, but they have become the delivery fleet in times of crisis, when Elon Musk in the early days couldn't get cars to customers and satisfy the goals that he'd promised investors. He engaged his customers to help with delivering the very cars. He, of course, sees them as co-designers of services. He sees them as taking test rides and being able to prototype different models. They're, of course, evangelists of the brand, but they also do a lot of social sharing and creation of videos and all sorts of things. They automate and help with the after service. They gamify the experiences. They even design new ways of being able to buy Teslas for purchase that are outside those within the company itself. And of course, they put their own direct investment and funding into new exciting ventures that they are excited about. And they even have superior access to Elon. It's almost like the models you see in a lot of influencer marketing today, and giving special perks to those that are the strongest followers. Compare that list to your patient advocacy list and tell me if it stacks up or not. Probably not. They even defend Elon, of course, in times of crisis. What would the Pharma Motors Club look like? What are the things? Of course, they could be empowered volunteer customers, but Government lobbying advocacy, that's already a part of many advocacy work, but could they actually get involved in therapy design or beyond the pill design? Could they take part and raise awareness of trials? Could they donate to lab tissues? Believe it or not, one company, Leo Pharma in Copenhagen, did do that under their previous CEO, Gitte Arbo. And they also gave groups of non-affiliated scientists with the company access to their labs in order to be able to run their own experiments. Very open innovation approach. And of course, co-designers of patient experience, making R&D more public. It's a currently very, very closed market. You can never see what's going on. Access to the management team. Could you imagine your senior leaders being more willing to speak directly with the most empowered patients? Ultimately, a move from key opinion leaders to digital opinion leaders to patient opinion leaders and all of the strategies that might go around those. And that is absolutely what you would see. So multiple ways that Elon Musk would harness the crowd. The third area is better building blocks. What do I mean by better building blocks? Well, the ultimate building block of the pharma industry is not really the patient, it's more the patent, right? It's, you know, the IP protection that we can put around our science. And for better or worse, that is the immutable law of our industry, the building block that everything else is built around, the entire timelines and pipeline and processes, all around the fact that a patent is worth as long as it is. Elon Musk has been open sourcing his patents at both Tesla and SpaceX so far. That may surprise you, it may be news to you, but believe it or not, he has no enforcement of IP protection within his companies. And that is something that he does for some obvious reasons, and some less obvious reasons, and we'll have a quick look at some of those. Sorry, I've got a lot of stuff taking up my screen here. Why does he denounce the traditional IP defense and warfare that goes around so much of the defense? The first reason is because the mission. You remember I talked about the mission and how he puts the mission above even his own commercial concern? Well, he will say that if the world needs to transition to sustainable energy or become multi-planetary, whatever it is, then if other companies try pursuing it as well, we'll actually get there faster. So the mission trumps all. And again, that's one of the reasons why he inspires such loyalty amongst the customers and the general public that work with him. Better relationships with competitors, of course, having relationships with competitors enables co-opetition. So he's actually worked with many of the car companies, you may not realize this, in the development of their own electric vehicles, particularly in the early days of Tesla. He actually kind of needed to in order to sustain the company and get some alternative sources of funding going. He actually needed to, you know, help other car companies to manufacture or distribute or even understand electric vehicle technology. So that is very much part of his philosophy. The fight, of course, just moves to different battlefronts. You know, think of the B2C industry, which is not so IP protected in most instances. You have to fight on brand. You have to fight on reputation. You have to fight on your relationships, your quality, your price. Imagine Pharma didn't have the luxury of IP protection, because that, again, is the model that he would push forward, and it moves it to a completely different battlefront. It moves, of course, towards openness and transparency and being willing to share. And again, that is something that we don't do in our industry typically. And it builds that legion of fans who are inspired by mission over money. Yes, as you've just seen, he's also been able to create companies more valuable than Pharma, despite not holding onto his own patents, which is interesting. Of course, in Pharma, this is seen as almost make-believe. You know, I showed this to a couple of people prior to this, and they just thought I was mad. IP isn't just desirable in pharma, it's critical. It's the fundamental thing that we're actually building everything on. Well, there are a few things. There are a few ways in which you can currently have a more relaxed approach to IP protection, patent pools, non-enforcement pledges, collaborations outside R&D. We've seen great progress. Hats off to those, you know, the digital therapeutics alliances that are joint developing endpoints and co-campaigns around digital health. Open innovation is all there. But the biggest factor that was leveled at me is that pharma is just one actor in the health ecosystem. Even if pharma was to be totally open with its patents and with its model, you've got PBMs, you've got other actors who are effectively stopping that value provision traveling as seamlessly as you might like it to. So in other words, he has to move to a different playing field altogether. This is Elon now. He would have to move to a different playing field altogether. He would have to move from pills to experiences. Let me talk about another industry again for just 1 second. This is what the music industry used to look like. It used to be about physical media. It used to be about, playing your cassettes, playing your CDs, playing your vinyl, and all the rest of it. And I'm absolutely fascinated always by the graphs in the music industry that look a bit like this, that show different media over time. And you can see the heyday of the market was this line in the middle, which was around 2000, and the industry was worth just over 20 billion at that point. But it's declined. It declined, obviously, when the internet came in. Things like Napster really affected the music industry. And we've seen a recent resurgence through the use of paid streaming, the Spotifys and Apple Musics of the world, etc. But what you see is that this line is nowhere near as wide as it was back in 2000. So does that mean that the record industry is suffering? It's in pain. It's a fraction of what it used to be. Well, sometimes it likes to say it is. But the truth is that it's found a whole other revenue source entirely. And that other revenue source is represented by this picture here. It's the live experience. It's the physical concert going. And of course, when you look at any graph of this, there's a slight anomaly. You may have heard of this thing that happened a couple of years ago called COVID-19 that affected the general pattern in the live music industry. But you can look at graphs that actually look at 2023 and even 2024 data, and you can see that that curve has actually continued to grow beyond the pandemic, apart from that analogy. And what's really interesting to me is that the live music business, the industry, has just overtaken the recorded music industry for the first time ever just in the last year. That might surprise you, considering, how much of music you consider you consume of the recorded variety versus the live variety, but it's absolutely true. And I think that this experience is, it might feel like I'm talking a million miles away from pharma, but look at cell and gene therapy for a moment and consider whether that's a treatment or a drug or an experience. Consider whether or not the many different actors and the many different processes and the many different systems involved in something like CAR T cell therapy is more of an experience, and whether or not being able to play competently on that level going forward is actually going to be the winning item or not. I would argue that Elon Musk would never consider the industry in isolation. Nothing in isolation. He is not focused on just making pills. And that is very clear from, for example, the system that he's developed at Tesla. I already said it's not about the car. It's about the entire energy ecosystem and the Powerwall system and the supercharger system, the network, which he allowed any other company to use for free, by the way, is an example of where he's gone above and beyond. He's not just making the car. He recognizes that he needs to do much more. And I'm inspired. I've got an idea of something called the culture, which is actually a phrase used by one of Elon Musk's favorite authors. He loves to take ideas from his favorite authors. You may know this. And one of his favorite authors is Ian Banks, who produced this thing called the culture, which is like a higher-minded society that is a separate system from those at which the normal people use. And I'm a little bit inspired by the news that came out last week and that is being touted at the JPM conference at the moment by Dave Ricks, the CEO, which is Lilly Direct. If you haven't been to lillydirect.com yet, then take a quick look, because it's really interesting to see just how much of a separate system, a separate ecosystem, separate healthcare ecosystem they appear to be developing. If you even look at the bottom of this screen, you can see that experiencing the potential benefits of independent telehealth service providers, the giving access to alternative care pathways to patients. If you scroll even further down the page, they start talking about pharmacies. They're effectively trying to, Dave Ricks is very kind of nonplussed when he explains it in his interview, but they are doing something quite bold here by developing a whole nother layer on top of the existing ecosystem. They think they can do it a lot better direct. And that's despite forays like Amazon into the pharmacy markets. And obviously this is triggered by Zepbound and the access to those kind of drugs, which is, confined in a lot of cases. But I think it's a really interesting model that we're going to see a lot more of. I think that an Elon Musk inspired system would go a little bit further than this. I think that he would actually develop something that starts at the point of birth. I think he would look at creating genotyping and outcomes monitoring. and starting in utero, analyzing genetics in the fetus to identify potential risks, and then using technology. I've got the example of the Whoop watch device, which doesn't have a screen, as a way in which I think that will probably progress. I think that you'll see a direct-to-patient network bypassing traditional channels, including those PBMs, to deliver medications directly as per the Lilly Direct model. And I think that within that ecosystem, you would also see the value-based or the outcome-based pricing model being introduced as well. So ultimately, Elon Musk would develop his own separate health ecosystem. Maybe not initially, but certainly over time. And he would try and actually make that available to others, because then it would be more robust actually in the process of doing that. He would also make this physical. He would bring this into the physical world. He was very inspired by the original Apple stores, retail, that you will have seen. The first one, of course, being in New York. And he very much copied a lot of that for his Tesla stores. And I had a little bit of time enjoying myself over the Christmas break, speculating as to what an Elon Musk-inspired health hub in a busy metropolitan location might actually look like. And I used obviously AI to develop some concepts here as to what that could do. So I very much see that he would try and build his own architecture and not consider his role as confined to medicines at all. Okay, what time is it? I'm sure, oh, I'm going way over time here. Okay, I'm going to have to quickly skip through then. Obviously, you're going to see the report. Mutated management. There is a huge amount of stuff that would change here over what's done normally. He doesn't like MBAs or PhDs. He much prefers natural scientists and engineer leaders. He doesn't like hierarchies. He typically has 50 people or more reporting to him at each of his companies. Yes, that's actually true. No, he doesn't sleep very much. He doesn't like people who accept errors, and he very much wants to push people out of that accepting mindset. The woke culture he describes as an enemy. He prefers to describe his workplace as a hardcore culture. He doesn't like ESG targets. He wants to have an ethical goal in the first place. He doesn't want perks. He wants everyone to drink from the tap. He doesn't want departments and silos. He wants multidisciplinary offices. He hates working from home. Live in the workplace where possible, under your desk if you have to. He doesn't like people who focus on single strengths. He wants everyone to be an expert in everything. He doesn't want separation of departments, particularly things like commercial and medical. He would consider that a very artificial separation. He doesn't like industry self-governing bodies, the types of the ones that I'm talking about, the FPs and Pharmas of the world. He would like to redefine the rules himself. He would tackle and speak with regulators directly. He does this even today. He spars with regulators and finds out who and what were the causes of individual regulations. And he would strip out those local hierarchies. So believe it or not, that would disappear. Inspired again by Steve Jobs, who did that when he returned to Apple. Multiple KPIs is a big enemy of Elon Musk. He likes to find a single metric. And he doesn't expect anyone to have a long-term career at his organizations. He actually almost actively encourages them to work like dogs and to burn out after a period of just maybe 2 to 4 years, and know that he will find staff replaceable. That might sound very ruthless, but it is very much the way he works. This is actually a slight bastardization of 2 or 3 different things that he said at different times, but ultimately he did say this. We want the opposite of psychological safety. This is the enemy of urgency, progress, and velocity. We want hardcore. Discomfort is a good thing, a weapon against the scourge of complacency. And you may have seen this email that he sent when he took over Twitter, called a fork in the road. He even changed his Twitter picture to a fork in the road when he sent this. And he absolutely asked everyone to either sign up for his hardcore way going forward, or 3-month severance, goodbye. Thank you very much. And absolutely no excuses or complaints whatsoever in that process. The single metric thing is very, very important to Elon Musk as well. Here are examples of single metrics that he's taken at his other organizations that are absolutely defining to the rest of the organization. Finding that single metric is hard. I'm not pretending for a second that it isn't. But what could a pharma single metric be? Well, here's a few ideas. Again, I haven't really got time to dwell on this. As you can see, I'm trying to speed up quickly. The end of outsourcing. I'm very sorry, but sales and marketing, of course, you've already had a big slap in the face from Elon Musk in this session. It's now time for those in drug development. CROs in particular, he would consider to be a goner. I'm sorry for those of you who are working in drug development, because of course it's almost entirely outsourced the actual trials themselves, and he would consider that a giant failure, of a systemic failure that we need to bring in-house and need to bring to the covers. And I think that he would pioneer a few interesting things. This was an idea of mine that I think that you could imagine from someone like Elon Musk, is the clinical trial hotel. Why not? Why not combine and make a desirable place to actually spend time in and to be monitored and given treatments under a controlled environment? Why not live stream some of the drug development process? He wouldn't just do this. Vass at Novartis was famous for creating the kind of Star Trek style monitoring systems of clinical trials. Elon Musk aims for transparency in everything that he can. And I think he would take what he's taken from SpaceX mission launches and actually make them public, live streaming drug development as well. So that's pretty much what I'm having to say. As I said, I had to race through a lot of stuff here. I've written a 50-page white paper, so make sure you have a look at that. It's got a lot more detail in. It's got some additional chapters in that I didn't get to. I do just want to say, though, in summary, that this 4A's approach is absolutely critical. And just breaking it down one step further, let's just look at this, because in isolation, none of these things that I've talked about today would actually work. Let me just show you. So it starts with that audacious challenge that I mentioned before. That is the starting point always. That then leads to that customer leadership idea, the concept cars, the fashion design, where you provoke and you inspire your audience onto something more. That is then what inspires interest and ultimately loyalty, drives the interest. And it, of course, increases the company valuation, which becomes another tool in the armory as a cheap source of capital. It then is exacerbated by the patient advocacy upgrade and the way of pulling together the patients. It allows that divestment away from sales and marketing, and which he famously tries to avoid altogether. And of course, it enables also an alternative business model that doesn't focus on the protection of IP. That then frees up funds out of sales and marketing and IP protection and business development activities towards building a much more holistic ecosystem around the pill. And it, of course, that creates the holistic experience and system design that ultimately is a separate idea from, or a separate venture from the rest of healthcare. That then puts huge pressure on the engineering breakthroughs and introduces the concept of the idiot index and the cost cutting and the in-housing of previously outsourced activities that basically says that he can do things at an order of magnitude less cost, as he's proven in several industries. He then challenges the regulators in the system because, of course, he's doing things in a different way and he can do things in a different way. And finally, he pushes that hardcore work ethic and organizational design to make all of those things possible. And yes, it's a kind of a loop. It goes back then to creating the next audacious challenge, which is made possible through all of those things. And although I kind of want to, in fact, I'm going to launch another poll question to you all right now. It's going to take you a few minutes to actually fill this poll question in. So I'm just going to hold it open. So let me launch it 1 second. Just need to get myself organized here. If you look at this, you will see a kind of new ranking question. It's a two-parter. So it's both, what do you think will be the biggest impact and what do you think will be the biggest risk? So I'll give you guys a few minutes to look at that. I'll show the results in a few minutes' time. But the point that I'm trying to make here is that this is an entire strategy. It's an entirely different approach based on different principles. You can't really take just one of these areas and do it on its own. Okay, don't really have time to go into this, but Elon Musk has a 5-step universal process. Again, it's written in my report. Make the requirements less dumb, always the first step. Delete part of the process. If you don't end up adding more parts back in after you deleted them, then you didn't delete enough in the first place. You then simplify or optimize the design. You accelerate the cycle time. And then finally, you automate. Be careful not to try automating earlier in the process. He learned this the hard way at Tesla by automating too early and effectively creating a lot of problems. Okay, so that's Elon Musk for you. As I said to you at the beginning, you may have seen I posted a couple of things on LinkedIn. Is this guy a reckless child or is he an inspirational leader? Well, the answer, of course, is yes. He is both of those things. And if you talk to people who've worked with him, if you read his biographies, you realize that the two things come in the same person. It's actually impossible to separate the two. Okay, I wanted to finish on a quote not by Elon, but actually by Adam Grant about how his approach to failure looks. But I don't really have time because I want to get to some Q&A. So let's get to that Q&A. By the way, if you've enjoyed this session, and if you enjoy thinking in this way, do consider coming along in June to an entire event where we do this. And you've probably heard of our Pharmageddon event. The first time we did in Barcelona, it went really, really well. We're bringing it to New York on June the 11th and 12th, and we would love to see you there. This is the home for the disruptors in our industry. It's where it's the comfort zone for those who like to be outside their comfort zone, right? And I very much hope to see many of you there. Okay, Rena has been waiting patiently in the background. I've given her hardly any time, but maybe if you guys don't have to run, we can go over by a few minutes on this one. I normally finish on the hour strictly, but maybe we can extend it and go a few minutes over if that's okay with you, Rena. Thank you so much for being here. I tried to talk quickly, but
no, I know you have a lot to say on this, and actually that probably introduces the first question, because
sure.
the chat has gone absolutely crazy, as you can imagine.
I haven't even been looking.
Just to try and get everyone's points, and I will definitely highlight the key words and the key themes that are coming from the chat. It's a very kind of polarized sort of audience, but the first thing I want to ask you, and I want to put you on this defensive point of view, because a lot of people have said about how amazing this is, your insight, and how this should be a TED talk. But actually, a couple of people have also said, hang on a minute, like, on what basis do you talk about these things? Are these based on your assumptions or research? Someone else has said, how do you know what he would focus on? Do you speak on his behalf? So
yes,
I think
I'm obviously the official spokesperson for Elon Musk.
Exactly. Just to sort of give everyone, because I know how much work you've put into the white paper. I've read it. So it would be really useful to know how much research has gone into this, Paul.
A fair bit, obviously. I have to say, like I did say at the beginning, I was inspired by back in, I think it was like September, October time, in my conversations then, finding that people, even when they tried to be innovative, it was very hard for them to see alternatives. And I decided at that point to just take a deep dive into someone who definitely has produced alternatives. So, reading all the books, watching all the talks, seeing all of the interviews, and of course, yes, a healthy dose of speculation, shall we say. He has never, for one instance, apart from his Neuralink, shown an interest in working in big pharma. But I do think that my job in this industry is to be a translator, to take what is happening in other industries. And this is what I do when I give talks, when I write a lot of the stuff, is to try and sort of see what's happening elsewhere and translate in, because there's no point in just listening to what the head of IKEA or Lego or whatever the inspirational company you come up with is doing. We need to see how that can actually affect us in pharma. And so that's my job here. Yes, quite a lot of work.
So really, this is a predictions webinar, isn't it?
Well, I haven't done one of those, you may have noticed, and that's normally what I do at this time of year. I don't know if this is a prediction, but I guess it's a provocation more than a prediction, because I think that we think we're innovative, but really the only innovators in our industry are those in research, in drug discovery.
Yeah, and he made that comment, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, about entrepreneurs sort of messing about with apps versus those who go into heavy industry. And surely pharma is considered a highly regulated heavy industry. It's only a matter of time, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so in terms of the big words that are coming out in the chat, there's some very, pro, very against. We're hearing about things like his lack of empathy, that's coming out very strong, his potential danger when it comes to patient safety, and his disregard for compliance. I won't read out names of people who because there's so many people have kind of said points around these. On the plus side, we hear about disruption, visionary, people love the 4As, and there's been a lot of talk about prevention. So I just want to ask you in the last few minutes about this piece around prevention. Do you think Elon Musk would focus on the elimination of disease and the prevention of disease? Daniel says the future is prevention, but what's in it for pharma? Claudia says we risk being called sick companies, not health companies. Eduardo said prevention is under-considered by pharma. And Jorge says prevention is the start of pharma dismantling. What are your
Yeah, well,
thoughts?
like Andre, I'm impressed you managed to do all of that. You must have taken some furious notes as well during this session.
Yes.
Thank you for that, Rena. There's many reasons why I invited you here. Rena's amazing, by the way, just in case you didn't know. The truth is that he is actually compliant most of the time. He is compliant with 99.999% of the regulations he's required to comply with. He works in very heavy industries, which are naturally very restrictive. But he believes very strongly that over time, as a natural consequence of sophistication of humanity, that systems become more bureaucratic and more regulated over time. And there has to be an opposing and counteracting force in order to stop the entire system from just seizing up and being unfeasible for any form of future innovation. So he regards himself as being someone who's actually focuses attention on a small number of areas where regulations have gone too far, but being very, very vocal about it. And what he actually does is he goes public with it. So this is something that he would do in Pharma as well. I didn't really have time to talk about this, but he would actually find and name and shame and find the specific areas that he considers to be anti-logical or anti-progress, and he would parody them in a very public way, and of course use his entire legion of fans to apply pressure on whatever that pressure was. And by the way, people like Trump and people using these kind of strategies as well. A lot of the time, it's becoming a thing, right? That you can almost codify, and you can very much see that he uses that again, harnesses the crowds to get what he wants and have those people on board in the first place. As for the concerns that people have issued about, reckless behavior and safety, I totally see that. He's a child. He's like a lot of the time he's a 10-year-old in a 50-year-old's body, and he doesn't think through the consequences of what he does. He's very, very impulsive. But the thing is that the vast majority of the time, particularly over the last 10 to 15 years, his impulses have ended up being more right than wrong. And as a result, he's gained this kind of crazy confidence where he can basically, through force of will, push employees, push stakeholders, even push patients and customers to his will. That could be considered very dangerous. But I would argue that the greatest danger is the not doing anything. And I would argue that, as I said at the beginning, we are so early in our evolution in our industry and so far to go that we absolutely need that force to push and move that evolution. Remember, evolution is random. Yeah, evolution is a random set of mutations that are happening and then natural selection to see what sticks. If you don't have the randomness and the experimentation, even at the cost of people's lives, he famously said that when he decided to get his mission for going to Mars, he set his mission for going to Mars with SpaceX. He said, people are going to die as he achieves this mission. That is a definite thing that will happen. But it is also what is necessary to move humanity forward and become a multiplanetary species. Now, I don't particularly have a motivation for becoming multiplanetary species. He regards it as a safety thing. If Earth was to get hit by a big meteor, then humans have a chance of survival if they live on another planet. Okay, we don't probably think in these kind of terms very often, but that is exactly his approach. So he might be reckless, he might be boyish, he might be inspired by science fiction books that he read when he was 11 years old. But a lot of that is good as well as bad, and you can't hold back because there are some bad eggs as you make that omelet.
Yeah, yeah. And there were definitely comments based on people's feelings, like people felt that Pharma won't, or rather patients will stop working with Pharma if
Yeah.
Musk was the head of that pharma company. And there are, that's not necessarily based on any evidence as such. It's based on a feeling. And it keeps going back to this piece around his lack of empathy. And we haven't really mentioned his medical diagnoses, have we, really, of being autistic? And
No.
you've talked about meritocracies and stuff. But, what's the advice if, let's say he takes over as CEO of your pharma company tomorrow, or of a pharma company tomorrow? Are people really not going to work with him being at the top because of the concerns, or will they wait it out and see? Or,
Yeah.
what's your prediction there for, like, he takes over a company tomorrow?
Well, it's very polarizing, isn't he? So, yes, some people would leave, some people would be fired, and some
Mm,
people would absolutely bloody love it. That is
mm,
both employees and customers. Now, you might say, what's the point of energizing, engaging, and serving 10% of the patient population that actually goes along with what he's saying? Well, if you've ever studied the adoption curve in any introduction of any new technology, you'll realize that the innovator group is 2.5% of people typically. Those are the people that adopt any new technology. Think about how long it took you to play around with ChatGPT. Were you playing around with it in November 2022 when it first
Yeah.
arrived? Because
Yeah.
if not, then you're not part of the innovator group. I'm sorry, you're just not. You are probably part of the early or late majority. And if you haven't used it yet, then you're definitely part of the laggard group. So that is how things are adopted in generally. And he will work with those true fans, as it were, in order to get it right, in the same way that he worked with the most excitable electric vehicle proponents back in the early days of Tesla, right? You, again, won't have heard of Tesla back in those days, right? Because you were not part of the very small number of people who cared about performance electric vehicles based in California, right? It doesn't matter that you're not hitting the mainstream on day one, even when it comes to health. I would argue that that is absolutely the way forward. And by the way, I forgot to address the questions about prevention, so I should probably just cover that. Prevention is an interesting one because I've worked with some of the people pioneering our industry in prevention over the last few years. And the problem is that, again, it's the system level. The system is not geared up. It's very hard to run a prevention clinical trial outside of vaccines. Okay. It's not very easy to prove that a drug has kept somebody healthy as opposed to non-healthy. And that entire sort of system and ecosystem that is around there makes it very difficult, despite the fact that most health systems are now trying to invest more in prevention than in care in the first place, because they're trying to save money too. What's most likely to happen is that it comes from the private space, I would say. It comes from the fact that people are paying for subscriptions to Peloton. It comes from the fact that people are buying apps and looking after their own nutritional values. And people who, again, it's going to be a small component of people because it's the people that can afford it in Western countries that are spending the money on these things, spending in many cases thousands and thousands of dollars on these things. That's possibly where it's going to start, and nucleated. It's actually the same as things like the longevity movement, which again is like the sort of preserve of billionaires that are trying to extend their own lives, right?
Yeah.
So you've
And
got
Carol made a point about
prevention.
that link,
Prevention
by the
does
way,
need to be
between money.
mainstream. Technology is definitely an enabler, but it would have to be done privately as opposed to publicly. And therefore, it can't be as mainstream as anyone would like it to be on day one. It has to start that way. And yes, Elon Musk could do that, and AI, of course, is a massive part of it, but it's not going to happen tomorrow, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean we shouldn't try.
And again, people still saying it's been really interesting. It's been, massively inspiring, but just not sure how it's going to work in pharma. And I think it's important to note that this wasn't a lesson in what we're going to do tomorrow as a result of listening to Paul, right? This was just for you to sort of get us thinking. This is baby
It's a
steps.
thought experiment, absolutely. It's to give people. Rena, do you mind if I just quickly share the results of the poll, just because I'm sure people are curious to see that as well. These different colors are slightly confusing. It's actually the first time I've used this polling. Okay, so what will make the most difference? I think it's the yellow that's considered to be the game changer and the light blue that's no impact whatsoever. Okay, so the audacious mission people are convinced about, and building a holistic alternative direct health ecosystem, people also believe will be a huge factor going forward. So that's very, very interesting. And then on the second question, where are the liabilities coming from? Well, people think that it's the hardcore ethic and the public sparring. So it's the very visible things, I think, that he's famously bad for, that are worrying people at the moment. But interestingly, I would argue there's more blues than yellows in that picture. Not by much, not by much. But people think that it's less of a risk, more of a risk to do nothing, perhaps. So that's very interesting, I thought. We've
A
gone
couple
over
of
time.
hours.
I don't know if we should continue or not, Rena. I'm happy to continue for another couple of minutes if you think there are burning questions.
I mean, to be honest with you, I think we probably covered them all, or just by having that general chat about the key themes that are coming out. Just a lot of people were kind of making comments rather than actually asking questions,
Okay.
if that makes sense. So, but what's really interesting is that there are so many opinions and they are so different in this one space. And actually that's refreshing, because sometimes, you know, we can sort of, if we had a webinar about patient centricity, you end up just having a lot of people saying the right things. And what's really interesting with this subject is there is no right opinion, is there?
No, absolutely not. And I definitely think that that was kind of the point, was to try and create some polarization and debate. We don't have the conversation often enough. And you know, Rena, as a compliance expert, we didn't even get time to talk about compliance, ironically, which is kind of annoying. But
Damn.
I know. Please, I've put a little question up on here now, which gives you the chance of saying you want to talk to Rena about compliance. Damn it. So choose that option if you are interested in doing that. This is just a next steps thing, so feel free to choose as many options as you want as to what you might like to do going forward. But I am obviously very open to anyone to suggest questions and ideas for the way forward, going and how we can take this forward, and have a bit more of a discussion even. I'm willing to do like a sort of open mic type session on this in a few weeks' time if people are interested in that. So just keep the dialogue open, get back to me, speak to me, talk to my team. Okay. Wow. Well, I think that might be everything for now. I don't think I've got other slides that I need to progress, but I do want to say a huge thank you to you, Rena, firstly for being so damn patient while I took 15 minutes longer than I should have done in actually saying all of this stuff. And obviously being willing to answer those questions. You are a fantastic person working in our industry. We need you very much. And really great that so many of you have stayed on to debate this idea and these ideas with us. Obviously looking forward to talking more. And if you want me to do a session at an internal event that you might be running, that is definitely something I do a lot as well. So just let me know if that's of interest. And talk to Rena. Happy New
Thanks,
Year,
Paul.
everybody. I look forward to seeing you again very, very soon. I look forward to talking to you. I look forward to seeing you on the next session. I'm really, really pleased that you could join us. You are obviously 13 minutes already late for your next meeting, so you better go. And I will catch up with you very soon. Thanks so much, everyone.